What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So we're going to be doing 9 decks in 9 days and a tier list for you guys. We just did our updated Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro deck. We have repeat on the docket, pirates, locations, and so much more. If there's a deck that you would like to know, let me know down below and I'll see if I can work it in. In addition to that, again, the tier list, I have like 35 decks overall to rank and go through. I want to do my due diligence and research and look into them all a lot so I can give an accurate video and my thoughts on all of that. Again, if there's a deck that you'd like to see included in that tier list, at least let me know down below and I will see about it and do my due diligence in looking into it. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead. Why did we lose it? Is it back? There we go. We have a handful of cards to talk about from the new set, Azurite Sea, and then we're going to go ahead from there and go over our deck list because we have an updated deck for Emerald Amethyst, Emerald Tempo. I think Tempo is actually in a really good spot. Not only is it a tier 1 deck right now while we finish out the format, you're getting a card like Diablo. So this offers, if you want Diablo shift line, obviously green Diablo is really good. There's the 1-drop where you can look at your opponent's hand. And now there's this one where it functions similar to Broom and Chernobog, where you get to draw a card when it is banished. And instead of quest or play a character to be able to draw, this one is just when banished you draw a card. So keep in mind, like, there's some pros and cons to that, right? A big con is 0 attack. That's a huge con to it. A big plus, though, is that you can quest with it, leave it on board, and continue to quest with it, and force your opponent to remove it, and then you get to draw a card when they do, but it might be able to net you a few lore in the process. So naturally, it's going to be a solid card and worth testing in pretty much every Amethyst list. I'm still not sold on it. I think it could be really good, but the 0 attack to me is something that I'm not sold on it yet, but maybe I end up being wrong and it's just like a staple Amethyst card. I just think we already have Chernobog and Broom that function similarly. And yeah, I'm not sold overall on Diablo, but we'll see moving forward how it works out. Some other cards. We're going to just go through some Emerald or Amethyst cards. Sorry. The new Genie, the 7-cost legendary, a 4/7, shift 5. So whenever you play a card, draw a card. That sounds pretty broken. At the end of your turn, though, put all cards in your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order. So why would you play this? This doesn't sound that good. You're going to use up your ink. We're not playing like Blurple with Mufasa, where you can just reset your ink well when he quests. Why would you play it? Well, if you pair this up with Clarabelle, they both trigger in the end step, or at the end of your turn, and you can trigger your Genie first. They both go in the bag, and you resolve Genie first, put all your hand on the bottom of your deck, and then you resolve your Clarabelle, which then gets you to draw cards equal to your opponent's hand. So there's a nice little interaction between Genie and Clarabelle, so that's why I wanted to bring him up and talk about him in this. And it is a shift target, so if you want to play smaller Genies, you can go ahead and do that. We got the mini goat, the white rose. So on play, it gets you a lore. It's a 3-cost though. I don't think this card has a place in this deck. I think people are going to try to put it in here just because it's the guaranteed 1 lore right away. Get a lore. I get it, but overall, I don't think that it should be played in this deck particularly. In aggro strategies, I could see it. However, we do have another Amethyst card, and this one I do really like in the deck. Maleficent Staff. So whenever one of your opponent's characters, items, or locations is returned to their hand, gain 1 lore. And it's inkable. So that's pretty good because we're playing Tempo. You want to bounce your opponent's cards. Not only now can you bounce your opponent's characters and whatnot, you get lore for doing so. So you're protecting your early threats with like your Kit Cloud Kicker. You're protecting your cards, and as you go on and do that, you're gaining free lore in the process. So I think that it's very strong. I think that it's a very good card, and I think it just naturally fits into the tempo strategy very, very well. So moving on, we have a lot of Emerald cards. That's really it for Amethyst. I don't think there's a ton for this deck. I'm really excited though for the Jasmine cards. I think that they're very strong. I think being inkable also helps a lot. When you play this character, choose one. I like when there's multiple effects to choose from. It just helps with the utility of the card. So you can exert a chosen damage character. That's really nice. Obviously, it's one turn later. And it's on damage characters, so it's not exactly like Pinocchio. It's not exactly like Elsa. But being able to potentially exert a character and also being able to, or also I should say not and, or also being able to give a character reckless, kind of like a Lyle Tiberius would. You don't get the opponent losing lore like a Lyle Tiberius gives you, but at the same time, and he has 4 willpower, it is inkable and there's a good shift target. So I think in that regard, there's actually some good reasons to play Jasmine. Moving on, we also have another 1-drop that I thought was interesting, and that's Fred. So why is this card interesting? It would probably replace your Cursed Merfolks because it's inkable. It's a 1/1, not a 0/1, but it only quests for 1, not for 2. But Merfolk usually gets taken care of pretty quickly. And your opponent discards a card, whereas this one, whenever it's challenged, you get to gain 2 lore. Which then brings us to Gazelle, a 2-drop character. So when you play this character, chosen character gains evasive until the start of your next turn. Obviously, that's why you would play her, because when you play her, you can give another character evasive. I could see her having play in the right format as the format changes. If we start to see evasives really being a threat, I could see Gazelle really coming into the format. To start out, though, I think it's going to be a lot of experimental, a lot of aggressive strategies, and I don't think Gazelle is worth playing right away. But maybe we revisit her like a month into the format as the format shifts. But for the initial weeks of the format, I don't think that Gazelle is going to be a card worth playing. Heffalumps and Woozles. Remember that episode like it was years ago. Chosen opposing character can't quest during their turn and draw a card. So it's similar to the Steel Song, but except instead of not being able to challenge, they cannot quest. Could be an interesting little tech to slow your opponent's roll down while drawing a card. If you're building around Ursula, Deceiver of All, you could potentially stop 2 characters from questing and draw 2 cards. So there's some nice little interactions there, but on its own, I don't quite see it being that impactful. A card that I've possibly slept on, You Came Back, being just an action, ready chosen character with no restrictions though, so it can still quest or challenge. That's pretty big, but I'm still out on this one. Actions that are uninkable, I feel like have to be very impactful, and I don't know that this card is yet. And maybe I'll be wrong on that, but I don't think that this card is going to be worth the hype outside of, there might be some crazy combo that kind of comes up because of it. But at the same time, like, is it going to be consistent enough to warrant an uninkable card in this slot? Like, usually your uninkable cards are your blowout cards, your super power cards. Not super power, but you know what I mean. Your, like, staple 4-of type cards. And that's, I guess, maybe not true, especially with Ruby. But then again, in Ruby, you can't just look at it like, oh, 2 Medusa, 2 Tremaine. It's 4 removal characters. Like, you got to look at it a little differently like that. Anyway, though, that's talk for another day. Another one, we got Megabot. So lots of big Hero 6 cards coming in, which is actually really awesome. The was it 5-cost Baymax? Not the one that got the enchanted. But the other Baymax, I really, really like that card where he's in the red suit. I think that card is absolutely incredible. But again, that's for another day. So Megabot. Item enters exerted, and which is fine, especially if you play it on 2, because by 2 you're probably not going to need to do a whole lot. You can exert it, banish this item, choose one. Banish chosen item or banish chosen damage character. Apologies. So essentially it acts as a form of removal. Maybe I don't think in Emerald Amethyst it's that great. Maybe I don't think that it does make its way in. A card, however, that I have been kind of curious on was the Perilous Maze Watery Labyrinth. So essentially it gives all of your characters here a Flynn Rider, Charming Rogue, a Cursed Merfolk type effect, where whenever a character is challenged while here, each opponent chooses and discards a card. in Amethyst Emerald Hyper Aggro, I think this card is going to be incredible because it nets you a lore. It has 8 willpower. It's 1 to move here. I think it's very, very strong, like very strong. And like I said, giving that discard effect. The one thing though is that going to be too late to really go after your opponent's hand? So I don't know. But at the same time, in tempo, I don't think it's that great. I think it's going to see some play though. I think we're going to see it in topping lists. I think that it's probably going to be in that like played 20% of the time, something like that, is like a 2 of. But I don't think it's going to be like a mandatory. I don't think it's going to be a staple. Definitely something to test and try out and see how it goes. But if you end up not playing the card, I don't think that you'll be in the minority by any means. And then we have the Big Jasmine. This is the one where I was talking about the shift that's really strong. Just a 5/5 questing for 2 is really good. A 6 cost shift 5 kind of sucks. But, I mean, you can't really complain too much. You save 1 ink, I guess. The effect also only works when you shift her, so that is kind of a downside. And I'm going to test her. She's going to be in the list. But the fact that you have to shift her to get the effect, it makes me kind of leery on it. I don't know if it's going to get in. And maybe we end up playing Morph just as another way to shift. But when you play this character, if you shift a player, return all other exerted characters to their player's hands. So there's 2 ways you could go about this. When you shift her, don't quest or do anything first, and then your opponent's characters that are exerted all go back to their hand, and then you're free to just quest and do all your stuff. Or depending on their board, maybe you do quest with yours and then you shift her and bounce your own back to your hand, and then you can replay them ready and quest with her. Just some little interaction there. Just be mindful of that it does affect you as well, so you don't want to lose your own hand. And last but not least, I think this card is so interesting. Like, especially if you like play it and you're in a late game, this card could potentially one-shot a castle because it's not once per turn. You just pay an ink and it gets a strength. I think three willpower too also makes this card really, really intriguing. I love the artwork on this card. It's probably one of my favorite cards in the set. I don't know if it would. I like the Enchanted this set. I don't know if I'd like this card as that Enchanted. I'd like it with like the set 1 or 2 type Enchanted artwork. I think it would look really, really cool. Obviously, we know it's not going to be the set championship card either, but again, I think it would have made a fantastic set championship card, but nonetheless, it did not. I think this card is really interesting, and I don't know that it ends up seeing a lot of play because it really doesn't do anything. It's just kind of there for a niche late game scenario. So if it's played, it's going to be like a 1 or a 2 of. But like I said, I really, really like the artwork. I think that card just looks awesome. I love Stitch. And the effects are really cool. Like just being able to pump it up a whole bunch. And with, like I said, 3 willpower is just actually sneaky strong on this card. So what does my list look like? Well, first and foremost, I have 12 uninkable cards, and it comes in relatively budget, especially within a competitive deck, 165. Most tempo decks usually are in that like 150 to 200 range. Got 8 1-drops, peaking at 3, dropping off pretty heavy then, and going all the way up to our 7. So nothing really too crazy there. Our 1-drop spots, we got the 8. I got 3 Curse Merfolk. I just want to be able to get aggressive. I think it's really important versus certain decks in the format to be able to hit like a Merfolk Banzai playline, like 1-2, and then you're just in a really good spot if you can just jump out on your opponent really quick. Clarabelle there because, well, she's really nice for the shift, but even on her own, like play her, pay 2, and banish a chosen item is really strong. And then in that last spot, I really consider Diablo like a lot. I just think I think aggro is going to be really popular early on, and I wanted something with 2 willpower that can deal out some damage, and yeah, that's kind of why we went with Rafiki. I probably would go Broom over Followers even, just because the 2 willpower, and I can trade a 2/1/1 characters then, as opposed to just being able to trade with the 1/1/1 character. But I went with Rafiki just because being the challenger, being able to swing for 3 twice potentially, it felt like the best option. Like I said, this is an early format call. I think Rafiki's going to leave the deck as the format progresses, but in the beginning of the format, I think that Rafiki's the right one drop character to play. In our twos, we got the 4 snakes, 3 Banzai, kind of like the Merfolk. I just want to hit an aggressive line versus certain decks like Popsicle. And the 3 strength is just really, really strong. Like I said, I really like that Stitch, so naturally he's got to be in there. Like I said, just 1 or 2 though. Anything more than 2 is too many. 4 Ursula is pretty standard. 4 Fox is pretty standard. And then going 2 Crab. I always like 2 or 3. I think 4 is too many. 1's usually not enough in this deck. Ruby Amethyst a lot of time can get away with 1 because they have things like Maui anyway. And then Jasmine. I wanted to try her. Instead of like Lyle Tiberius kind of took his spot for right now. And a lot of the things with these early iterations of decks right now, especially when you see them online, 1 of 2 things are happening. People are either trying to just clickbait the hell out of you, or they're trying to test things. And how do you do that? You test it and you play it. So I like to put these ideas out there because I like to think that I'm trying to do the latter and test things. And if I put the ideas out there, and sometimes I might disagree in the comments with thoughts, but I always appreciate it, good or bad, because even if I disagree with it, it still makes me think. And then I like have to go through and just consider all options, because I think anyone who thinks that they're the smartest in the room instantly falls down a peg, because the moment you think that and you stop pushing yourself forward, you're starting to regress. So I think you should always take criticism, good and bad, and even if you don't want to admit it in the moment, to at least look back on it later and think maybe they had a point. Do I want to look at that again? Do I want to revisit that? Do I want to just kind of hash it out, make sure that I feel the way I do about these cards? 3 Kit Cloud Kicker. I like the bounce aspect. We're going for that tempo control, especially if you hit like your Merfolk Banzai and your opponent has a slow start. He can be really good. Hitting Deceiver of All, hitting Diablos if they're not at the coves. Way too much talking and not having enough water over here. 3 Goats. I started doing that with a lot of decks last format when I just need to be able to cut a card, and Goat was an easy one to cut. 3, I think 3 Goats is plenty. 4 Rabbits. You need the 4 Rabbits though. 2 Fifth Spirit Ulsas. Every time I play 4, I feel like the card underperforms, but I've tried taking it out of lists, and it's like Elsa could be pretty good right here. So I think I leave her in, but you don't really bank on her, so I think 2 is plenty. The 2 Jasmines, like I said, you need the shift line, so there's really no reason to play more other than trying to see her more, I guess. But again, we might have to add more Finn or something. I just want to test out that play line a little bit more and see how it goes. 2 Ursulas, 3 Clarabelles, that's pretty standard. And then we got the 4 Friends, and I went 2 Bruno instead of the 2 You're Welcome that are typically in the list because of Maleficent's staff. Just trying to get that extra lore off of it. So not only do you get a character off their board and discard a card from their hand, potentially just the 1 card if that's the only one, you also get a lore for it too. So I just wanted cards that synergize a little bit better, and Bruno works with your staff a little more than that You're Welcome does. Again, just want to test that out. And then the Emerald Chromacon, because on your opponent's turn then, if one of your characters gets banished, you return chosen character to their player's hand. And if you choose your opponents and you have the staff out, again, you're getting lore on your opponent's turn. Now there's not many effects to do that, but this is one of them. And then 4 Castles. Castle's actually not really mandatory in tempo, but I think the card's just too good not to play it. Overall, though, this is kind of my deck idea, and I think the direction tempo is going to go. Some thoughts on other new cards. Obviously, as the format develops, depending which decks fall into place at the top, your techs and choices may change a little bit depending how aggressive do you want to be. That Merfolk Banzai line could easily change. That Rafiki's a huge flex spot too there, like I said. The turn 1 cards that can draw you cards obviously going to be really good. The Jasmine play line, again, being kind of testing. And then is staff worth it? I think staff ends up being a 1 of in this deck, and again, Chromacon being like a 1 or 2 of as well, because they're both good on their own, and they're both, well, I shouldn't say completely on their own. Staff, kind of needs some of your deck, but it's not like specific to needing Chromacon. And Chroma Count's actually pretty decent on its own. So let me know what you guys think down below. Until next time, take care.